My name is Ava Malone. I'm 32 years old, and until recently I thought I knew what family meant. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, the only child of two public school teachers. My parents were firm but kind, loving, reliable, the sort of people who brought home stray dogs and taught Sunday school on the weekends. I never craved chaos or extravagance. I just wanted peace, love, and someone to share a quiet life with. So when I met Josh Whitmore at a friend's housewarming party in San Diego, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Josh was warm, funny, charismatic in that boy-next-door kind of way. He talked about his parents with pride, sent flowers after every argument, and cooked dinner on Sundays. Within a year we were married in a vineyard ceremony that cost more than my first car. And yes, his parents paid for it. The Whitmores were a whole different world. Nancy and Greg, Josh's parents, lived in a sprawling house in Orange County with more bathrooms than people. His sister, Elise, had a luxury skincare business and a daughter, Lillian, from a previous marriage. It was a world of organic juice cleanses, trust funds, tennis clubs, and private schools. But I wasn't intimidated. I was raised on good values, and I believed they'd appreciate that about me. They didn't. Nancy always found something to criticize. My clothes, my job, the way I stirred soup, too aggressively. Greg rarely spoke unless it was about stocks or something he read in Forbes. Elise was polite but distant and barely around. And Lillian, well, Lillian didn't speak at all. According to the family, she'd gone completely silent after her father died in a car accident a year before I married Josh. She was also bedridden, they said, some psychosomatic reaction to grief and trauma. A series of specialists had been involved. There was talk of a rare neurological condition. But nothing ever quite added up. So I didn't push. I figured they were dealing with pain the best way they knew how. I wish I had asked more questions. Last week, everything began unraveling. It started with a phone call. Ava, Nancy said, her voice brisk and impatient, we're going to Hawaii for 10 days. We need someone we trust to stay with Lillian. I blinked, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder as I watered the peace lily by the window. Wait, 10 days? This week. Yes, darling, we leave tomorrow. It's a wellness retreat. Greg's back has been acting up and, frankly, we need a break. And Elise, well, you know how fragile she is. She's staying at a spa in Arizona for some rest. Lillian needs someone here. She trusts you. She didn't sound like she believed that last part. And she definitely didn't ask, she told me. Can't Josh stay with her? I asked. I mean, she's his niece. Josh has a job, Ava, she snapped. Unlike you, dear. That stung. I'd left my job in behavioral therapy to help Josh through a rough patch after he lost his position in corporate sales. We'd agreed it would be temporary. I took freelance consulting gigs where I could. But Nancy never missed a chance to remind me that I didn't work. I just think it would help to have more notice. Your family, she interrupted. Will be gone tomorrow. Josh will drop you off at the house in the morning. Thank you. She hung up. That night, Josh tried to spin it. Come on, babe. It's just a few days. You'll have the place to yourself, no distractions, peace and quiet. And maybe it'll help Lillian open up. You always said she looked at you differently. I did say that. There was something in the way Lillian stared at me, like she was trying to say something but couldn't. Like she was waiting for me to listen hard enough. So the next morning I packed a week's worth of clothes, my laptop, a notebook, and a few psychology books I hadn't finished. Josh drove me to the Whitmore estate. A massive, cold mansion nestled behind tall iron gates. He kissed my cheek before he left. Thanks for doing this, he said. Mom will appreciate it. And who knows? Maybe this will help her finally accept you. I didn't say what I was thinking, that it wasn't my job to earn her approval. That if Lillian really was as fragile as they claimed, leaving her alone with someone untrained, according to them, was grossly irresponsible. But I kept my thoughts to myself. That's what I did in this family, smiled, nodded, blended in. The first few hours were uneventful. The housekeeper had already gone home and the place was eerily silent. I tiptoed upstairs to Lillian's room around noon. She was lying there in a massive canopy bed, staring at the ceiling, her face pale and blank. Hi, Lillian, I said softly, sitting on the edge of the chair near her bed. It's me, Ava. I'll be staying with you for a little while. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Her arms lay perfectly still over the blanket. Her chest rose and fell. Slow, mechanical, lifeless. I reached out and gently brushed a piece of hair from her face. I'll be downstairs if you need anything, okay? No answer. No sound. I made myself a sandwich in the over-equipped, underused kitchen and tried to relax. Maybe I'd write. Maybe I'd finally dig into that project I kept putting off. An hour passed. Then, around 3 p.m. I decided to check on her again. But something felt off. The hallway was quiet, but a kind of unnatural quiet, like the air had changed. When I opened her bedroom door, my heart stopped. She wasn't in the bed. The blanket was folded neatly. The pillows fluffed. The room was tidy, as if no one had ever been in it. Panic bloomed in my chest. Lillian. I called. Sweetie. Are you? I turned and there she was, standing by the window. She looked taller than I remembered. Her long brown hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her expression was calm, too calm. She didn't look surprised to see me. My mouth opened but no words came out. Then she said it. 7 words. They want my 4 million. Please help. Her voice was soft but steady. Her lips trembled slightly but she didn't look scared. She looked relieved. I stared at her like she'd grown wings. Wait, what? You can talk. She nodded. And stand. Another nod. My knees gave out and I dropped onto the edge of her bed. Lillian, what's going on? She took a slow step toward me and sat beside me, her small hand brushing against mine. They said I had to pretend. That if I made a noise they'd take it all. My dad left me money. A lot. They said I was sick. But I'm not. Her voice cracked at the last word. I sat frozen. This child, this poor girl, had been faking an illness under threat for over a year. And the entire family was in on it? Your mom? I asked. She left. Said she needed a break. Grandma said I couldn't go anywhere. They made me take pills that made me sleepy. But I stopped. I flushed them. Tears welled in my eyes. I reached out and pulled her into a hug, her thin arms wrapping around me like she'd been waiting months to feel safe again. Okay, I whispered. We're going to fix this. I promise you, Lillian. No more pretending. She looked up at me with wide, hopeful eyes. You believe me? Absolutely, I said. And I'm not leaving you. Somewhere deep inside I felt something harden, some unshakable resolve forming. This wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was about justice. About protecting the innocent. About exposing every lie they'd ever told me. My in-laws left me here thinking I was harmless. They were about to find out just how dangerous that assumption was. I held Lillian for what felt like hours, though it might have only been minutes. Her small frame leaned into me, warm and trembling like a bird finally freed from a tight, cruel cage. My mind raced, shoving 1,000 questions to the front of the line, none of which could be asked all at once. So I just sat there holding her, my heart splitting down the middle while rage began to pour through the cracks. She wasn't sick. She wasn't mute. She wasn't bedridden. She was a terrified 11-year-old girl, forced into silence by the very people who claimed to love her. Josh's parents. Elise. Maybe even Josh. I looked at her again, really looked. Her hair was slightly oily, her fingernails trimmed but unclean. The room was pristine but sterile, as though it had been set up for display, not for a child to heal or grow. The blinds had been partially drawn, letting in a dim wash of light but keeping the world out. The bed wasn't made for comfort. It was made to look sick enough. I flushed the pills, she said again, this time softer. But I pretended they still worked. Grandma checks sometimes, but I hide the rest. What kind of pills? I asked. She reached into the side drawer and pulled out a small pill bottle, the label peeled off. There were still a few chalky white tablets clinking around inside. I didn't recognize them right away, but I snapped a photo on my phone. My years in psychology and patient advocacy had taught me this much. Document everything. Do you feel okay now? Any headaches? Nausea? I asked. She shook her head. I stopped taking them 2 weeks ago. That's when I started planning. I wanted to wait until they were gone before I told someone. Why me? Lillian's eyes filled with something I didn't expect. Shame. Because you're the only one who looks at me like I'm a real person. That hit me harder than anything else. I blinked quickly, fighting the wave of anger tightening in my throat. Okay, I said, steadying my voice. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're getting out of this house. She looked panicked. But if they come back early. They won't. And even if they do, they'll find an empty room and a locked gate. You're not staying here one more night. We packed only what mattered. I grabbed her essentials, some clothes, a few books she'd hidden under the bed, and her stuffed polar bear, which she clutched like a life raft. I also slipped my notebook and laptop into my bag. Then I checked the Wi-Fi router in the hall. Yep, a small blinking light beneath it, a discreet camera mounted to the molding above. My blood boiled. I pulled my phone out and snapped a photo, then ripped the camera out of the wall with shaking hands. Before we left, I walked into Nancy's office. It was locked, of course, but I found a bobby pin in the guest bathroom and popped the lock the way my father taught me when I was 12. For when you lose the key, he used to say. Inside, I found exactly what I was hoping for. A safe. It was small, hidden behind a bland watercolor painting. I tried the obvious combination, her wedding anniversary. It clicked open on the first try. Inside, documents, bank statements, power of attorney forms. One in particular caught my eye. It was signed by Elise, granting full control of Lillian's trust to her parents until medical recovery is deemed complete. It had no doctor's signature, no court seal, just Elise's shaky scrawl and Greg Whitmore's neat, smug one. I photographed every page. We left the house in silence, Lillian's small hand clinging to mine as we slipped through the side gate and into my car. I drove us to a modest motel 20 minutes away in Costa Mesa. No cameras, no questions, just a 24-hour manager and a corner room with thick curtains. Once inside, I double-locked the door and turned to her. Hey, you're safe now. No one can get in here. Lillian sat on the bed and stared at her hands. What happens now? I didn't know the exact answer, but I sure as hell knew what wouldn't happen. She wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to that lie. I'm going to make some calls, I said gently. And you're going to rest. I stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. I pulled out my phone and called Rachel. She was one of the sharpest child advocacy attorneys I'd worked with during my time as a therapy consultant. We hadn't spoken in a few years, but this was an emergency. She answered on the second ring. Ava? Well, it's been. I need help. It's urgent. I laid everything out, from the moment Nancy called to Lillian's 7-word confession to the falsified documents. Rachel listened in stunned silence. You have evidence? She asked. Yes. Photos. A pill bottle. And a child who can speak, walk, and has clearly been manipulated into silence for money. She exhaled sharply. Jesus. I'll file for emergency custody tonight. Where are you? I gave her the address and promised to stay low. She said she'd start paperwork immediately and forward the video to a contact at CPS. Then she said something I didn't expect. This is going to get messy. Are you ready for that? No, I said honestly. But Lillian didn't ask for any of this. And she's not fighting alone. When I stepped back into the room, Lillian was curled up on the bed with the polar bear, fast asleep. The lamp cast a soft glow over her small face. I sat down beside her and watched her sleep for a moment, wondering how long it had been since she felt safe enough to rest like that. The next day came like a storm. Rachel arrived by 10 a.m. with a social worker and 2 police officers. Lillian woke up to voices and froze like a deer in headlights, but I knelt beside her and whispered, "It's okay. They're here to help." She nodded slowly, and when the officers gently introduced themselves, she stood up, on her own, and shook their hands. Rachel handed over the documents and evidence. The social worker interviewed Lillian for over an hour while I sat in the bathroom, biting my nails and fighting the urge to pace a hole into the tile. When she finally emerged, she gave me a tight nod. She's telling the truth. She's bright. Articulate. She said you're the first adult to ever ask if she wanted to talk. I couldn't stop the tears. I covered my mouth, nodded, and let the emotions crash in silence. The state issued an emergency protective order that day. Elise's custody was suspended pending investigation. Nancy and Greg's legal rights were frozen. And Josh? Well, I hadn't spoken to him since that morning. Until my phone rang around noon. It was him. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, then answered. Hello. Ava. His voice sounded off. Thin. Tense. What the hell is going on? Mom called me in a panic. There are cops at the house. She said you kidnapped Lillian. I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. Funny. Because Lillian stood up and told me you were all stealing from her. He went silent. Don't bother pretending, Josh. I found the documents. I saw the cameras. I heard your voice on the footage talking about her money like she's a damn investment. I didn't mean. You knew, I snapped. Maybe you didn't orchestrate it, but you knew. And you said nothing. You let them use a child like bait in a trap. She's not your responsibility, he shot back. She is now, I said. And if you ever come near her again, I'll make sure you're in handcuffs. I hung up and blocked his number. That afternoon, Rachel's team filed a restraining order. A judge granted me temporary custody until a full hearing could be scheduled. Lillian didn't say much, just sat close to me the whole time, clutching my sleeve like she was afraid I might vanish. That night we stayed at a different hotel, one with better locks and a kitchenette. I made mac and cheese while Lillian colored a picture of a beach, her version of Hawaii. They lied about going there, she said quietly. I know. They went to a bank in Maui. Grandma said it'd be easier to move the money from there. I blinked. You heard them say that? She nodded. They talk around me like I'm not real. That one sentence gutted me. By the time I tucked her in that night, I had made one final decision. I wasn't just going to protect her. I was going to burn their lies to the ground. By the third day, the headlines had already begun to crawl across my phone like termites eating through wood. California heiress found drugged and isolated by family. $4M trust at center of abuse allegations. Orange County power couple under investigation after granddaughter breaks silence. Some articles blurred Lillian's name, others didn't. I hated them all. She wasn't a case or a headline or a goddamn clickbait thumbnail. She was a child who hadn't felt sunlight on her skin in months. And now the whole world was watching her breathe. Rachel tried to contain it, but it was too late. Someone inside CPS must have leaked it, maybe a nurse, maybe someone from the court. I don't know. What I do know is that when I walked into the hotel room that morning and saw Lillian curled up in the corner hiding from the TV, something inside me snapped. They showed my face, she whispered. I told the lady not to show my face. I turned off the television and sat beside her. They weren't supposed to. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. She looked at me with those wide liquid eyes, and for a moment I saw it. The fear again. The trained silence. The way she curled into herself like she was trying to disappear. I pulled her into my lap. They're not going to win. Not this time. Lillian didn't say anything. She just held on to me like I was the last branch on a sinking tree. Later that morning, Rachel showed up with her assistant Carlos, carrying a box of files and a heavy dose of bad news. They're trying to paint you as unstable, she said, her voice tight as she flipped through a thick manila folder. Elise filed a petition for emergency custody, citing mental instability and kidnapping. My mouth went dry. That's ridiculous. I know it is. But she has money. And when you have money, you get people who write affidavits for favors. Rachel slid over one page. A statement from Dr. Kayla Morgan, a private psychiatrist in Santa Barbara, who claimed I had a history of depressive episodes and emotional dysregulation, based on a single phone consultation I'd had 2 years ago after my mother passed. She called in a favor, Rachel said. This is slander. But it's dangerous slander. I sat back stunned. She's not even a doctor I saw more than once. It wasn't even therapy, it was grief counseling. Rachel nodded. And she's willing to lie under oath for Elise. I stared at the document in silence, my chest burning with a sick combination of fear and fury. They're scrambling. Yes, she said. Because they're losing. But losing people like the Whitmores didn't go quietly. They didn't retreat. They didn't apologize. They pivoted. And that was the part one had to prepare for. I want to file for full guardianship, I said. Rachel's head lifted. Are you sure? That means a full court battle. Yes. And they'll dig into your life with a scalpel. If there's anything in your past they can twist. Let them try, I said. Because I have something they don't. I have the truth. And I have her. She studied me for a long moment, then gave a small, proud nod. Then let's go to war. The days that followed blurred together. Interviews. Paperwork. Legal filings. Rachel submitted a comprehensive report to the judge, including the photos of the surveillance equipment, the documents I found in Nancy's office, and the pill bottle still sitting in a Ziploc in the minibar. The lab confirmed the pills were low-dose benzodiazepines, enough to sedate a child, but not enough to knock her unconscious. It explained Lillian's sluggishness, her inability to focus, the trembling she described when she tried to sit up. They drugged her just enough to mimic illness. The court date was set for the following Monday. I spent the days leading up to it collecting everything I could. Emails, voicemails, text from Josh asking if I'd calmed down yet, and assuring me we could work this out privately if I stopped making a scene. I forwarded them all to Rachel. Then late Friday night my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered hesitantly. Hello. There was silence for a moment, then a girl's voice, high-pitched and anxious. Ava? It's Sophie. Elise's assistant. I blinked, surprised. Sophie. Please don't hang up, she rushed. I saw what's been happening. And I can't keep working for her. She's been planning this for a while. My heart kicked into high gear. What do you mean? I mean, the moment her ex died, she went straight to her parents and told them she needed to lock the money down. I overheard the calls. She said Lillian was too young to understand value. That she didn't want her ending up spoiled and soft. They made her fake the breakdown. My skin went cold. Can you swear to that in court? Pause. Then, yes. But I need protection. Elise's boyfriend, he's not stable. And he knows I've seen things. I turned on speaker and signaled for Rachel, who immediately hit record on her tablet and began asking questions. That conversation changed everything. With Sophie's testimony, the whole story began to unravel like yarn pulled from a loose seam. She handed over voicemails, screenshots, bank receipts showing Elise moving trust funds into shell accounts managed by Nancy and Greg. It wasn't just abuse. It was fraud. A federal crime. By Sunday, news vans were parked outside the courthouse. Someone had tipped off the media again. Lillian stayed close to me, hood pulled low, refusing to speak to anyone but Rachel and me. She wouldn't even look at the reporters. And I didn't blame her. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in navy slacks and a cream blouse, my hair pulled back tightly. I looked the part. I had to. Courts weren't about justice. They were about perception. And I needed them to see a woman who could be trusted, who was calm, measured, and undeniably grounded. Josh arrived with Nancy and Greg. Elise came separately, wearing black as though she were in mourning. Probably for her reputation. When the judge entered, the courtroom fell silent. He was older, stern, and known for being ruthless when it came to child exploitation cases. Rachel opened strong evidence, timelines, documented drug use, witness testimony, including Sophie's affidavit. Then she played the audio. The courtroom sat frozen as Elise's voice poured out from the speakers. She won't remember this when she's older. And by the time she's 18, the money will be in trust accounts she can't touch anyway. She's just a kid. When it was over, Elise stared straight ahead, face blank. But Greg looked pale. Nancy's mouth was tight, her hands white-knuckling her bag. Then it was their turn. Their lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a gross misunderstanding fueled by personal vendettas and exaggerated claims. Our client, Mrs. Whitmore, only wanted what was best for her granddaughter. The judge held up a hand. Is this before or after she orchestrated a falsified medical condition and drugged her into submission? Silence. I've reviewed the evidence, the judge said. And unless you have a miracle in your pocket, I don't want to hear defenses based on good intentions. This child was silenced for profit. The court sees no ambiguity in that. Greg stood suddenly, ignoring his lawyer, and turned to Elise. You said no one would find out. Elise's eyes widened. Dad, sit down. You dragged us into this, he said. You said it was temporary. Enough, the judge snapped. Lillian's fingers tightened around mine as the room erupted into whispers and camera flashes. In the end, the judge's ruling was swift and uncompromising. Permanent guardianship granted to me. Criminal investigation against Elise, Nancy, and Greg forwarded to the district attorney. Restraining orders enforced. Trust funds frozen pending legal review. And Lillian? She leaned into my side and whispered, Can we go home now? I nodded. Yeah, baby. We're going home. As we walked out, reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked like machine guns. But I kept walking, one hand on Lillian's back, the other gripping her polar bear, feeling the full weight of everything we'd survived press into my spine. They thought she'd stay silent. They thought I'd back down. But they underestimated what happens when you corner someone who has nothing left to lose. Except a child who finally found her voice. We moved into a small house 2 towns over the day after the court ruling. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, creaky floors, and a stubborn front door that only closed if you kicked it a little to the left. But to us it felt like a palace. Like a fortress. It was ours. No cameras. No pills. No lies. Lillian danced through the empty living room the first night, barefoot in her pajamas, spinning with her arms stretched wide. I sat on the second-hand couch I bought off Facebook Marketplace, watching her, tears burning in my eyes. "This floor's slippery," she giggled, nearly wiping out. "Yeah. Try not to break your legs. We just got custody. I'm not ready to explain a case to CPS." She laughed harder, the sound pure and unfiltered. For a second I let myself believe we were through the worst of it. That the hearings, the affidavits, the cold courtroom stares, those things were behind us. I was wrong. The first sign came that weekend. I took Lillian to the park around noon just for some air and space. She'd been cooped up too long, and the California sun was finally warm enough to coax her out. She wore a sun hat and a pair of oversized sunglasses just in case. I packed her peanut butter crackers, some juice, and her favorite drawing pad. She'd barely started sketching trees when I saw the man. Late 30s. Business casual. Sunglasses, coffee in hand. He was sitting alone on a bench. Too still. No kids. No book. And his phone was angled just enough toward us that I saw the lens flash in the reflection of his glasses. He took a picture. My instincts kicked in before my brain caught up. I stood up, scooped Lillian's things into the bag, grabbed her hand and calmly walked back toward the car. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Just a weird guy," I said. "Probably nothing. But let's not wait to find out." I looked back once before pulling away. He was gone. The second sign came on Monday morning. An envelope. No postage. No return address. Just taped to the front door with a piece of blue painter's tape. Inside, a blurry photo of me at the grocery store with Lillian and a typed note. "The court can't protect her forever. Family." My stomach twisted. My hand shook. I read it 3 times before I tore it in half and flushed it down the toilet. I didn't show Lillian. Not yet. Not until I had to. I reported it to Rachel, who immediately filed a police report and pushed to get me emergency relocation protection. But without a direct threat or proof of who left it, there wasn't much they could do. I bought 2 cameras for the front porch and the driveway that same day. I started sleeping with my phone in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Every time Lillian coughed, I flinched. Every time a car idled outside longer than a few seconds, I peeked through the blinds. They weren't done with us. But I wasn't done either. I spent the next week quietly preparing for what I knew was coming. Rachel was working overtime with a private investigator. Sophie, Elise's former assistant, had gone completely underground after her testimony. She texted me once. "They came to my sister's job. I'm staying out of sight. Be careful." Josh texted too. Multiple times. "This is all a big mistake. We can fix this. You made this public. You embarrassed the whole family. You'll regret it." That last one. I saved it. Then I blocked him. The day the second hearing was scheduled. The hearing that would finalize the permanent guardianship and determine the criminal charges. I didn't eat. My stomach was in knots, every nerve in my body humming like live wire. Lillian drew me a picture that morning. It was us. Standing in front of a house with red curtains and a crooked chimney. Her hair was longer in the picture. My arms were wrapped around her. There was a caption in the corner in shaky, careful handwriting. "Me and Ava forever safe." I almost lost it. But I didn't. I had to stay steady. For her. The courthouse was chaos. Media vans. Protesters. Supporters. People holding signs that said things like "Protect Lillian" and "Stop trust fund abuse." The Whitmores had always been a high-profile family, but now their name was mud. Rachel leaned in as we waited in the lobby. "Greg's lawyer is trying to argue diminished responsibility due to Elise's manipulation. Elise is claiming emotional duress. Nancy's going full martyr, concerned grandmother misled by bad paperwork. It's all unraveling." I nodded, jaw tight. They're all adults. They made choices. I don't care whose name was on the check. They're scared. That makes them dangerous. And right on cue Josh walked in. He didn't look scared. He looked smug. New suit, shaved face, and that familiar grin, the one he used to flash when he thought he was smarter than everyone in the room. He made a beeline for me. "I just want to talk," he said. I stepped in front of Lillian and crossed my arms. "You've got 30 seconds. "She doesn't belong with you," he said calmly. "You're not family. You're a substitute. An angry obsessive." Rachel stepped in. "Say one more word and I'll make sure the judge hears about this." He glared at her. Then at me. "You think you won. But you don't know what you've done." He walked off before I could respond. I turned to Rachel. "What does that mean?" She shook her head. "Empty threat. Narcissists don't handle losing well." Still, I felt something dark curl in my gut. When court began, the judge didn't waste time. He read through motions with the impatience of a man who'd read too many lies in too short a time. "I've reviewed all evidence submitted since the last hearing," he said, "including new testimonies and the footage from the security system installed at Ms. Malone's home." "Wait, what?" Rachel turned to me slowly. "What footage?" I froze. "The cameras. I'd set them up but hadn't checked them." The judge looked directly at the defendants. "Mr. Whitmore, you were recorded outside Ms. Malone's home on the evening of May 9th. You attempted to place an envelope on the front door and appeared to tamper with the camera afterward." Josh's face drained of all color. The judge continued. "In that envelope was a veiled threat directed at the minor in question. You violated the protective order. You violated the court's directive to avoid all contact. And you demonstrated malicious intent toward the child you claimed to protect." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Josh stammered, I didn't threaten her." The judge raised a hand. "You did enough. And your mother and sister made it worse. Mrs. Whitmore, you filed forged affidavits and presented false psychiatric evaluations. Ms. Elise Whitmore, you were recorded coercing your assistant into altering financial records. This is no longer a custody matter." His voice lowered. "This is criminal conspiracy." He turned to me. "Ms. Malone, you are hereby granted full legal guardianship of Lillian Monroe. Effective immediately and irrevocably." Lillian squeezed my hand so hard I thought it might snap. Then the judge turned to the prosecution. "And I will allow the district attorney to proceed with felony charges against all 3 defendants. Court is adjourned." It took a full 10 seconds for the room to react. Greg stood, dazed. Nancy fainted, literally collapsed into her chair. Elise screamed, "This isn't happening." Josh just sat there slack-jawed like the floor had been pulled out from under him. But me. I knelt beside Lillian, pulled her into my arms and whispered, "We're free." She buried her face in my neck and cried like she'd been holding it back her whole life. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. People clapped. One woman hugged me before I could stop her. I didn't care. I was too numb. Too full. Too broken and rebuilt and burning with something fierce and maternal and indestructible. I didn't sleep that night. Lillian did, curled in a nest of pillows, safe and snoring softly. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a sweater, watching the street. One last text came in from Josh's number, though I'd blocked him twice already. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I just screenshot it, sent it to Rachel, and then deleted it. Because the only thing I regretted was trusting him in the first place. But now I had a new mission. A new future. And a little girl sleeping peacefully down the hall who finally knew she was wanted, safe, and never, ever, going back. The days after the court ruling were supposed to be the calm after the storm. That's what I'd told myself, that once the papers were signed, once the judge slammed the gavel and handed me the title of guardian, life would finally begin again. For me. For Lillian. But I should have known better. People like the Whitmores didn't disappear. They festered. They plotted. And they waited. It started with the news cycle still foaming at the mouth with our story. Overnight, we became an obsession for armchair lawyers and daytime TV panels. Talking heads debated whether I'd inserted myself into the family's affairs too aggressively. Others praised me as a hero. A few speculated if I was after the trust money myself. I couldn't walk into a grocery store without hearing someone whisper, "Is that the woman from the Lillian case?" They never said my name. It was always hers. The Lillian case. As if she were an exhibit in a courtroom, not a little girl who now flinched every time someone knocked on our door. Lillian tried to stay brave. She kept drawing. Kept asking if she could decorate her new room with ocean-themed wallpaper. But every now and then I'd catch her sitting by the window, staring out at the street with a nervous crease between her brows. "They're not coming back," I told her one night as I tucked her into bed. "The judge made sure of it." She nodded. But bad people don't always follow rules. I didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. A week later, Rachel called with a voice that barely held back fire. "They posted bail," she said. "All three of them. Josh, Elise, and Nancy." "What?" I choked out, feeling the breath rip from my lungs. "Greg's still in federal custody. The fraud charges tied to the trust accounts are sticking. But the others posted bond this morning. Elise used a third-party funder. Someone with ties to her new boyfriend's business. Don't tell me they're free." "They're out," she confirmed. "But under heavy restrictions. They're not allowed to leave the state or contact either of you. If they do, we take it straight to the judge." I hung up, heart thudding in my ears. I walked into the kitchen, staring out the back window like I expected Elise to be crouched behind the garbage can, holding a grudge and a matchbook. That night, I moved Lillian's bed into my room. She didn't even ask why. She just dragged her blanket and her stuffed polar bear in behind her, sat on the mattress and said, "I want to sleep close to you for a little while." We slept with the lights on. The next day I installed another camera, this time inside, pointed directly at the front door. I bought a stun gun. I double-checked every window lock. And I added a password to my Wi-Fi after noticing someone had tried to connect to the router. They were getting desperate. I could feel it. And desperation made people stupid. On Thursday I found a dead bird on our porch. Lillian spotted it first, standing frozen by the door before I rushed over. Its neck was twisted, wings splayed, and a tiny red ribbon was tied around one leg. No note. No message. Just a symbol. A warning. I reported it, of course. Rachel called the police. They filed it away like everything else. No proof of connection. Could have been a coincidence. A bird. A ribbon. Sure. Lillian didn't sleep at all that night. I tried to play it cool, reading her a story in bed, humming her favorite song under my breath, pretending my hands weren't shaking every time the wind brushed the window pane. She sat up around midnight. "Ava." "Yeah, baby." "Do people like them ever stop being angry?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for her hand. "They don't stop being angry," I said finally. "But we stop letting them win." 2 days later, someone set fire to Rachel's car. No one was hurt, she wasn't in it, but the message was crystal clear. Her firm upped their security. The police opened another investigation. But it was obvious. They weren't just trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to burn everything down. That same weekend the leak happened. A blogger posted screenshots, alleged emails between me and Rachel, one of which claimed I had plans to file for guardianship months before the court case. Another email suggested I was coaching Lillian for testimony. Both of them. Photoshopped down to the font spacing. But it didn't matter. Social media latched on like sharks to blood. I was trending within hours. Hashtag guardianship grifter. Hashtag free Lillian. Even a podcast popped up, digging into my background, my college records, an old ex-boyfriend who gave some off-the-cuff quote about me being controlling. And people believed it. They believed it because the Whitmores were rich, beautiful, well-connected. They'd spent decades cultivating their public image. I was just a woman who stepped into their world and started tearing down the curtains. Rachel called again, her voice flat with exhaustion. They hired a PR firm. One of the aggressive ones. They're spinning this hard, trying to get public sympathy before the criminal trials start. So what do? We get louder. The next morning I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop and started typing. I wrote our story. All of it. From the moment Nancy called me to babysit to the second Lillian said those 7 words. I posted it on Medium. I linked every court document that was public. I included photos of the false documents, the camera I'd found, even the anonymous note. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. It went viral in less than 12 hours. People began defending us again. Others posted their own stories of abuse, of betrayal by wealthy families who hid behind country club memberships and charity galas. A wave of support came crashing in. Messages from strangers offering protection, groceries, security systems, even therapy for Lillian. But it also painted a bigger target on our backs. 3 nights later, someone tried to break in. It was just past 2 a.m. when I heard the soft crunch of gravel outside the window. I grabbed the stun gun and crept into the living room. I saw the shadow move past the front door, lingering near the side window where I'd stupidly forgotten to turn on the motion light. The figure raised something, maybe a crowbar, maybe a flashlight. I didn't wait to find out. I hit the panic button on the alarm system and screamed loud enough to wake the dead. Lillian came running into the hallway barefoot and crying. The alarm wailed through the house. Flashing lights. Chaos. Whoever it was, they ran. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just a cracked flower pot and a footprint near the porch. But I knew. They weren't here to steal. They were here to scare. I can't do this anymore, Lillian whispered the next morning. I can't keep waiting for them to come back. I held her tight. You won't have to. I swear to you. I will fight until they're behind bars or gone forever. And I meant it. The final straw came when I received an invitation in the mail. An actual invitation. Thick paper, gold trim, embossed initials. It was for a gala. The Whitmore's Charity Foundation was hosting a Family First benefit event in Beverly Hills. They were throwing a party. A party about family. Rachel confirmed it. It was real. Elise would be there. So would Nancy and Josh. Smiling for cameras. Posing for donors. Acting like none of this had ever happened. I stared at the invitation in my hand, numb. They weren't hiding. They weren't retreating. They were daring me to show up. So I did. I didn't tell Lillian. I hired a sitter I trusted from Rachel's firm. I wore a black dress, heels that made my knees ache, and the coldest expression I could summon. Rachel came with me wearing steel gray silk and eyes that could cut diamonds. We walked in together. Cameras turned. Guests whispered. And there they were. Nancy. Elise. Josh. Standing at the far end of the ballroom like royalty. Elise wore a red gown. Nancy had pearls around her neck. Josh was in a tux like he hadn't tried to destroy a little girl's life. I didn't walk toward them. I walked to the microphone. It was unattended. The host hadn't begun yet. I stepped up, tapped it twice, and looked out at the crowd. My name is Ava Malone, I said. Some of you might know me from the news. I'm the woman who was granted guardianship of Lillian Monroe. The little girl who was drugged and isolated by this family. Gasps. Flashes. Chaos. They're here tonight, I continued, voice steady. Smiling. Toasting. Wearing designer gowns funded by stolen money and reputation. And if you're still donating to their foundation, you're complicit. You're funding abuse. And I will make sure every dollar is traced. Security started to move. Rachel stepped in front of me. I looked directly at Elise. You used to whisper in Lillian's ear at night that her daddy wouldn't want her to be weak. But you were the weak one. You let greed replace motherhood. And I'm going to make sure the entire world sees it. I walked out before they could remove me. The next day, every news outlet picked up the footage. The foundation lost 3 major sponsors within 24 hours. Rachel said it best over coffee that afternoon. That wasn't revenge. That was justice, served with just enough humiliation to taste like revenge. I smiled. But only for a second. Because until the Whitmores were rotting behind bars, I wouldn't rest. Not until Lillian could open her window again without fear. Not until she believed the monsters were finally gone. And I'd make sure of it, whatever it took. The trial began on a Tuesday morning under skies so gray they felt prophetic. There was no sun. No breeze. Just a dead hush over the courthouse, like even the air knew something monumental was about to happen. Lillian clutched my hand the entire walk from the car to the doors, her fingers cold despite the warm jacket. Her polar bear was zipped into her backpack, peeking out like a silent guardian. I'd braided her hair the night before, tight and neat, and we'd picked out her clothes together. A soft blue sweater and jeans. Simple. Brave. She hadn't spoken much that morning. Neither had I. There was nothing left to say. Not until the verdict. Inside, Rachel met us with a folder tucked under her arm and a face carved from stone. They tried to get another delay, she muttered. Claimed Nancy has a heart condition. Judge didn't buy it. Good, I said. Let's finish this. We entered the courtroom as a trio. Rachel, me, and Lillian, like warriors entering the final battle. On the other side of the aisle sat Elise, Josh, and Nancy. Greg was absent, still in custody on financial crimes, his trial scheduled separately. Nancy looked pale and exhausted, her pearls swapped for a plain scarf. Josh stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. But Elise looked right at me. She smiled. Not wide. Just enough to be unmistakable. The same smug, condescending curve of her lips she used to wear when she asked me to run errands during family holidays, like I was the help and not her brother's girlfriend. She smiled like I hadn't torn her world down. Like she still thought she could win. The prosecution began with the fraud. They laid out the documents. The shell accounts. The falsified trust reports. The audio recordings, Sophie's affidavit, and screenshots Elise had once demanded from her assistant and later tried to delete. Rachel had secured a forensics team to prove the files were wiped intentionally. Then came the abuse. Photos of the room Lillian had been kept in. Footage from the security cameras in the Whitmore estate. Testimony from 2 former housekeepers who admitted they were told to keep Lillian quiet and never talk to her unless asked. One even said Nancy instructed her to play classical music loudly outside the door so no one would hear if she cried. Lillian's drawings were submitted. She didn't have to testify, Rachel made sure of that. But her artwork said enough. A series of gray pencil sketches. Lillian lying on a bed, eyes wide, a camera watching from above. Another showed Elise pouring pills into a cup, her face exaggerated and stern. One sketch, carefully folded in half and submitted at the last minute, was of the polar bear crying. The courtroom was still. Heavy. Even the judge, usually so rigid and unreadable, sat forward a little during the testimony. Then the defense tried to fight back. Their lawyer argued it was all misinterpreted. Elise claimed she was desperate to help her daughter through extreme trauma after her father's death. That Lillian's behavior had been erratic and violent. That the medications were prescribed, though they couldn't produce a legitimate doctor to confirm that. Josh testified that he trusted his mother's judgment and never noticed anything unusual. Nancy cried. Sobbed actually. She begged the court to believe she was only trying to protect the family legacy. That she never meant to hurt Lillian. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I just sat there staring straight at them, my hand holding Lillian's as tightly as she held mine. And then on the 3rd day Rachel called me to the stand. I took a deep breath and walked up, each step echoing like a drum in my chest. They swore me in. I sat down. I looked at the jury. My name is Ava Malone, I began. And I didn't expect to be standing here. Not like this. I was just supposed to watch Lillian for a weekend. Feed her. Keep her safe. That's all. I paused, letting the words hang. But the second I walked into that house, something felt wrong. The way she didn't look at me. The way she flinched when I asked her if she wanted to eat. And then she spoke. 7 words. Just 7. I turned my head slightly toward the jury box. They're not really helping me get better. A few jurors nodded. And in that moment, I continued, I realized this wasn't just a sick child. This was a prisoner. A hostage in her own home. A child whose voice had been stolen so her family could control her future. And her money. I described the cameras. The pill bottle. The falsified papers. I told them everything. But then I leaned in, voice low, raw. They treated her like an inconvenience. A burden they didn't want to carry, but they sure as hell didn't want to let go of. Because of the money. Because of the name. Because of control. My eyes locked with Elise's. She's not a checkbook. She's not a tax write-off. She's a little girl who likes lemon cookies and ocean documentaries and coloring outside the lines. A few sniffles broke out from the gallery. One juror wiped her eyes. She trusted them, I finished. And they broke her. When I stepped down, Rachel gave me a nod so subtle I almost missed it. The defense didn't bother cross-examining. They were already drowning. On the 4th day, the jury left to deliberate. I took Lillian home. She sat at the kitchen table for an hour, silent, sketching something slowly, deliberately. When she was done, she handed it to me. It was me. Holding her hand. The courthouse behind us. Fire all around, but we were untouched. This is how I feel when we go there, she said softly. Like there's fire. But we're not burning. I hugged her so tightly she squeaked. The jury came back the next morning. The courtroom filled again. Rachel composed. The Whitmores cornered. Josh with dark circles under his eyes. Elise trembling. Nancy clutching a rosary she hadn't needed before. The judge asked for silence. The forepersons stood. On the charge of conspiracy to defraud a minor's trust, we find the defendants guilty. A murmur rippled through the room. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of unlawful surveillance, guilty. And one by one the charges stacked. Elise collapsed into her seat. Nancy sobbed again, louder this time. Josh stared at the floor, defeated. The judge dismissed the jury and looked straight at them. This court has seldom seen such a calculated, cold effort to manipulate and exploit a child under the guise of familial care. Your wealth, your influence, your reputation, none of it shielded her from harm. But justice will. He sentenced Elise to 8 years in state prison. Nancy received 5 years, with 2 years suspended for health concerns, though she was still required to serve house arrest and probation. Josh got 18 months plus fines and mandatory counseling. They were escorted out in handcuffs. Elise didn't look back. Nancy wailed. Josh kept his head down, lips pressed so tight they turned white. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. We walked out of that courthouse like survivors, not victors. The cameras tried to chase us again, but this time we had police escorts. That night I let Lillian stay up late. We baked cupcakes. Bad ones, half collapsed, lopsided with too much frosting, and danced in the kitchen to 2000s pop music like idiots. She laughed so hard at one point she fell onto the rug, clutching her stomach. And in that moment, watching her laugh with her whole face, I knew something had shifted. Not just the court decision. Not just the escape from the Whitmores. But the way she looked at the world. There was light again. There was hope. I tucked her into bed with 3 cupcakes in her stomach and glitter on her nose. Then I sat on the porch in the dark, alone, letting the night breathe around me. The fight was over. The fire was out. But the embers inside me? They'd never stop burning. Because I'd seen what money and power could do when no one was watching. And I'd promised her, they wouldn't win. They didn't. And now she was finally free. So was I. If this story gripped your heart and fired up your sense of justice, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Would you have done what Ava did? What would you do if your family tried to silence the truth? Subscribe for more powerful betrayal and revenge stories, where silence ends and the fight begins. Your voice matters. Use it.